of the Song Dynasty, exploring the history and charm of one of China's most fascinating dynasties. Episode 7. Confucianism gets ready to go global. In this podcast, we're going to meet Zhu Xi, another Song Confucian philosopher who oversaw the bedding in of Neo-Confucianism in Song society and set it up ready for it to spread throughout the world. I'm Bob Jones, and in this Why We Love the Song Dynasty podcast, I'm throwing the spotlight on what was to become one of China's most iconic dynasties in the country's long and colourful history. Now, you may be wondering why we are spending so much time discussing the ins and outs of Confucianism right at the start of our survey of the most marvellous Song dynasty. Well, mainly because it goes quite a way towards explaining some of the most outstanding aspects of Song society, especially the focus on learning and betterment, the appreciation of fine things, and the passion for understanding of how things work, and crucially, how to make all things better. Without this Confucian worldview, the pace of scientific and cultural progress during the Song period might not have been so breakneck, if happening at all. Before we move on to examine some of those life hacks in detail later in the series, let's take a look at the role played by another crucial Confucian scholar in the Song dynasty, namely a chap called Zhu Xi. See it this way: Confucius built the framework of the house. Mencius sorted out the rooms. The five masters, with Zhong Hao at the core, added all the soft furnishings, the sofas and curtains. Zhu Xi came along and provided the smell of hot coffee and cookies as you entered the house, which made it easier to sell the Song's brand of Confucianism farther afield. Zhu Xi was what we today would call a child prodigy or wunderkind. He was to Song Confucianism what Mozart did for classical music. At the age of 5, he turned to his father and asked, "Daddy, what lies beyond heaven?" How do you answer a question like that? Wouldn't it be great to be a fly on the wall to hear his father struggling to explain this to his precocious offspring? At the age of 8, he'd mastered the classic of filial piety, aka the Xiao Jing, a Confucian classic treatise which gives advice on how to behave towards a senior, such as a father, an elder brother, or ruler. He was still quite young when he lost his father and was brought up by several scholars, including some Buddhists, so he was exposed to a lot of different ways of thinking. He passed his top-level exams at the age of 19. The average age to achieve this was around 35. He played around with Taoism for a bit before becoming a student of the Neo-Confucian master Li Tong by the time he was 30. Li was a follower of the Chong brothers and influenced our hero strongly, guiding him towards the Confucian way of self-cultivation. He could easily have got a job as an official at the imperial court, but he preferred temple guardianships because it allowed him to read, write, and teach, but also to stay out of the cutthroat politics of the time. He was also so outspoken that he often rubbed his bosses up the wrong way. His life's work involved teaching many thousands of students, writing critiques of several classics such as the Book of Change and the Book of Odes, and the works of several past masters. The core, though, was making Confucianism more robust and less woolly. He wanted to give the belief more momentum, fit for the age, and able to meet the challenges from barbarian encroachers who were always harassing the Song dynasty. Taoism and Buddhism were simply too weak to stand up to the threat. Now's probably a good time to say a little more about filial piety, as this is seen as a core concept of the Confucian social system. Basically, it's a way of living your life, a social guideline. It's all part of this basic force which the Confucianists believed flowed through everything. The interconnectedness of all things, past, present and future, nothing was of greater importance than filial piety. With the help of this concept, a ruler was able to govern his country justly, and through it all people would bring order and harmony into their families. But what does it mean in practice? Filial piety, the relationship between father and son, is reflected in the sphere of the state by the relationship between ruler and his ministers. The Xiaojing goes like this: the body is a gift to the son by his parents. As such, it was important not to damage or harm it in any way. It also teaches that sons had to revere and to honor the family name and the commemoration of their parents, as seen through an ancestor veneration. The highest form of venerating one's parents was to achieve a high position and a high social standing. Your own status had an impact on the fame of the ancestors. Of course, physical care for parents was also part of the concept of filial piety, an aspect which is still of great importance in modern society, especially in some rural areas where traditions are strong. Filial piety even includes the rituals and rites to be performed on the death of a parent. In traditional China, for example, one had to leave your official job on the death of your father and undergo a 3-year-long phase of mourning. The emperor, as son of heaven, did not only have to be filial to his own parents, but also had to venerate heaven and to take care for the people, his virtual children. The common man had to follow the path of heaven, share the fruits of the soil with others, be sincere and economical, and nourish his parents. Fail to obey the teachings of filial piety, the Xiaojing suggests, should be punished by the full force of the law. In short, it was the rules of the game, maintaining stability in society. So, what did Zhu Xi bring to the party? Zhu thought that fundamentally people are good. How we deal with what life throws at us comes down to the talents and gifts we have, along with family and social environment. This was more complicated than what had gone before. He also didn't think that there was much point in simply sitting quietly to purify the mind. It was a practice which he believed actually slowed down the process of self-improvement. He favoured a two-pronged approach, nurturing one's feeling of reverence, but also investigating things. That's to say, understanding both the inside and the outside worlds. In both cases, trying to define some kind of reality. Zhu Xi also set about reviving the fabulously named White Deer Grotto Academy to serve as a base for Confucian teachings. He wrote about morality in public life. He decided that the character of the emperor was all important to the well-being of the realm. By cultivating his mind, the emperor would trigger a chain reaction leading to the transformation of the whole world. He was invited to the imperial court on several occasions, but it never lasted for long because he was so outspoken and called out corruption wherever he saw it. Needless to say, he made many enemies who made accusations against him. He died in political disgrace. After his death, later generations made his beliefs mainstream, namely that you had to honor the classic texts of Confucianism, see that the world was made up of things that you could and could not control. How you reacted was up to your own skills and talents. It was important to study the inside and out, both the things you could see and the things you couldn't. Meditation was fine, but boring. Taking things apart and then putting them back together again was much more fun. And it was important to encourage the emperor to be wise and kind. The game changer for future generations was Zhu Xi's publication of selected Confucian texts in 1190, which became known as the Four Books. His codification and interpretation of the belief system formed the foundations of Neo-Confucianism and had much to do with its spread to neighbouring countries and beyond. The first book, the Da Shui, or Great Learning, outlines the relationship between rulers, government, and the people. The second, the Zhongyong, Doctrine of the Mean, describes the way of heaven, motion, spiritual beings, and religious sacrifices. The third book, the Lun Yu, or Conversations or Analects, is said to contain the direct quotations from the ancient sage Confucius himself as recorded by his disciples. And the fourth and longest book contains the teachings of the revered Confucian scholar Mencius. Eventually, Juxi's interpretation of the four books became the basis of the imperial examination system right up until the end of the Qing dynasty in the 20th century. You may be asking, what's all this got to do with me? Juxi lived a long time ago, after all. That's true, but Confucianism, as practiced and perfected during the Song Dynasty, has proved very durable indeed. And as we shall see as this series goes on, it had a profound effect on the scientific and cultural aspects of the Song Dynasty, and shaped the way they and we relate to things and ideas and our own relationship with existence. This robustness of the belief system is very much down to the figures active in the Song Dynasty who unpacked Confucianism, stress-tested it, and released it into the wider world. Special thanks go out to Sanlian Zhongdu for their help in creating the content for this show. This is Bob Jones. Thanks for listening. Join me again next time. This has been a China Plus podcast. If you like the show, please give us a rating and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen. If you've got any questions or feedback, please feel free to contact us via email at podcast@cri.com.cn or find us on Twitter, China Plus Pods.